Before we dive in, if you love epic tales of war, strategy, hit that subscribe and like button, turn on notifications, and join our growing legion of warriors. Now, let's begin. Imagine an enemy so powerful, so technologically advanced, that their fleet was feared across the cosmos, a fleet capable of wiping entire planets from existence with just a flick of their fingers. Now, imagine that fleet sets its sights on Earth, the planet we call home, the one we've always thought of as safe. But in the cold depths of space, the Earth was just another insignificant blue dot, another target. And in the year 3037, that target was marked: the Urakan Empire, a name whispered in terror by those who had survived their conquests. The Empire's fleet was legendary, untouchable. They had obliterated worlds, bent whole star systems to their will. Yet, when they arrived at Earth's orbit, they didn't simply attack. They waited. They watched. The Imperial fleet was comprised of the most advanced warships ever created. Towers of steel and unknown alloys that could travel faster than light, each vessel a city in itself, brimming with weapons that could reduce mountains to dust. They had done it before, and they were about to do it again. But there was something that the Empire's generals didn't count on, something hidden deep within the human spirit. A spirit that, when pushed to the edge, would rise against all odds. For the Earth had never been prepared for a battle like this. But the Empire, though unmatched in its strength, had underestimated the one thing that could never be calculated, never fully understood: the will of the human race. The fleet arrived in the dead of night, no warning, no communication, a massive armada of ships hovering above the Earth like a storm cloud, casting an oppressive shadow on the planet below. Their first strike was quick, effortless. They disabled Earth's satellites in one swift blow, rendering humanity blind. In space, Earth's military responded immediately, launching every last missile and fighter jet they had. But it was like throwing pebbles at a moving mountain. The Urakan commanders watched with cold indifference. Their ships shrugged off every assault, their shields flickering but never breaking. It was as if they were playing a game, one that the humans didn't even know the rules to. The Empire's weapons fired in silence, delivering death from afar. A flash of light, a few seconds of searing heat. Entire cities disappeared. Nothing to worry about, one of the fleet commanders said to his second-in-command, his voice a steady monotone. Just a minor resistance. Proceed with the invasion. And so they did. But as the Empire's massive forces began descending upon the Earth's surface, the humans prepared for something that would shock even the Empire's most seasoned generals. They weren't going to surrender. Across the planet, whispers of rebellion began to stir, and somewhere, deep beneath the Earth's surface, hidden in the shadows of long-forgotten bunkers and secret military bases, a plan was set into motion. A plan that would change the course of history. The fleet was enormous. Countless ships, stretching across the heavens like a vast, glittering ocean. They came from 1,000 light-years away, bringing with them a technological superiority so vast it seemed impossible for any force to stop them. But there was one thing the Urakan had not considered: humans. The Urakan had never encountered a species quite like them. The Earthlings didn't rely on brute force alone, like most civilizations they'd destroyed. No, humans had something else. Something primal. And as the first waves of the Empire's shock troops landed on Earth's surface, humanity's hidden strength began to reveal itself. But before we delve into how the humans rallied, let's take a step back. Imagine being a soldier on one of those alien warships. Imagine you've been trained your whole life to fight in wars, intergalactic wars, and suddenly, this small, insignificant planet Earth is the next to fall. It should have been just another conquest. But what if it wasn't? What if there were things on Earth that even the Urakan had never considered? What if this insignificant world held secrets? Secrets that even the Empire's most advanced minds could not comprehend. The first sign that something was off came as the invaders began to land on Earth. The Urakan shock troops, well-armed and heavily armored, descended upon major cities: New York, Tokyo, London, Rio. They had already begun their systematic invasion. But what they didn't know was that humanity's heart was not so easily crushed. Earth's forces were scattered, outgunned, and overwhelmed. Yet, in the face of certain defeat, something sparked in the souls of the human race. In the chaos of the first wave, the world's governments fell into disarray. Military command centers were destroyed, communications severed, entire cities razed in minutes. But then came the unexpected, scattered pockets of resistance. It wasn't organized at first. No one had time to strategize or form proper alliances. But it was there, buried deep in every human, this inexplicable, raw instinct to fight back. It was primal. It was rage. Some say it started in the slums, in the streets where ordinary people, once powerless and ignored, found themselves armed, with stolen weapons taking to the streets. Others say it started in the quiet whispers of defiance among military commanders who refused to bow to the enemy. A simple phrase began to echo throughout the world. Not today. In the heart of the Urakan fleet, Commander Zethar, the general who led the invasion, stood before the Galactic Council, smug and assured. "The humans are weak," he declared. "Their planet is nothing more than a sandbox for us to crush beneath our feet. We'll sweep them away in mere days." His words were confident, but beneath them, there was doubt. A nagging feeling that maybe, just maybe, these creatures, these humans, weren't as easily subjugated as the others. And Zethar was about to learn just how right he was. The first true blow came in the form of Earth's military, a force long underestimated by the Urakan. The humans had no chance against the sheer might of the Empire's technology. But they had something the Urakan had overlooked: ingenuity. While the Empire's warships rained destruction from above, Earth's resistance began to rely on unconventional tactics. Imagine, for a moment, what it would be like to be on the ground, your home under siege, watching as entire buildings and monuments crumble before the onslaught. Most people would run, flee, hide, but not humanity. There were stories that spread like wildfire. Stories of a small team of rogue scientists, engineers, and military officers who had secretly developed technology meant to counter the Empire's overwhelming advantage. They had created something unexpected, something no one could have predicted. At a hidden facility in Nevada, under the desert sands, a team of engineers had been working in secret for years, unaware of the incoming invasion, but fully aware of Earth's vulnerability. They had developed a new kind of weapon, an electromagnetic pulse, EMP bomb, but far more powerful than anything humanity had ever seen. This weapon had the potential to disable the Urakan's most formidable warships. The problem was, the weapon wasn't perfected. It wasn't even fully operational. But faced with extinction, they had no choice but to unleash it. As the first EMP bomb was detonated high in the atmosphere, a blinding pulse of energy surged outward, streaking across the sky. It was meant to disable satellites, communication, devices, and technology. But the Urakan didn't know it was much more than that. The EMP bomb's signature had a strange, unexpected effect on their ship's advanced technology. They went dark. For the first time since the Urakan arrived, they faltered. In an instant, a portion of their fleet was rendered useless, unwittingly crippled by the same technology they had relied on to invade the Earth. What followed was a shockwave of chaos. Ships in midair lost control, careening into the atmosphere, crashing down in fireballs of destruction. Commander Zethar watched in disbelief as his mighty fleet, the pride of the Urakan Empire, was brought to its knees by a simple, human invention. On the ground, the human resistance began to rally. Soldiers, civilians, scientists, people from all walks of life, came together to defend their homes. They fought not just for survival, but for their families, their history, their very existence. They were no longer divided by national borders, but united by something far greater, a common cause. It was then that the Urakan realized their fatal mistake. The Empire had come to Earth expecting an easy conquest, but instead, they had awakened something far more dangerous than they could ever have imagined: the indomitable will of humanity. And now, Earth wasn't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for something bigger. They were fighting for the right to remain free. They were fighting for their future. But as the Urakan recovered from their first setback, the battle had only just begun. In the aftermath of the EMP attack, Earth's resistance was emboldened. The once fractured groups of survivors, fighters, and desperate civilians became a unified force. One that was no longer simply reacting, but taking the fight to the invaders. They adapted, they learned, and most importantly, they fought back. It started with guerrilla tactics. Small strikes, blindingly fast, against the Urakan forces. Cities like Paris and Moscow, thought to be lost causes, became battlegrounds where human ingenuity turned the tide. Every street, every alley became a place of ambush. The Urakan, with their towering war machines, were formidable. But they were not invincible. They had never encountered an enemy willing to fight to the last breath with such cunning. One of the most dangerous assets that Earth had at its disposal was a single ship, an old battleship named the Vanguard. Originally decommissioned decades ago, it had been resurrected by a group of rebellious engineers. Though it was outdated by the standards of the Empire, it carried a secret weapon. Deep within its hull, a modified EMP generator was installed, one that could take down an entire fleet in one fell swoop. Captain Eliza Graves, a woman with a reputation for defiance, was given command of the Vanguard. She was no military leader, but she knew one thing: the Urakan underestimated humanity at their own peril. Graves and her crew launched a covert mission to infiltrate the heart of the Urakan's fleet. The plan was simple: get close, drop the EMP, and then escape before the enemy knew what had happened. But like everything involving the human spirit, it wasn't going to be simple. The Vanguard's mission was nothing short of suicide. Even with their newfound technology, the humans knew that the Empire's fleet could destroy them in a heartbeat. But Earth was out of options. The invaders had been relentless, and the world's armies were dwindling fast. As the Vanguard approached the Urakan fleet, it was clear that something was wrong. The Empire's ships, once sleek and majestic, were now moving erratically. Something had changed. The pulse from Earth's EMP attack had shaken them, but it hadn't stopped them. Inside the command center of the Urakan flagship, Zethar paced, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. He had underestimated the humans, their resilience, their ability to adapt. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. No other species in the galaxy had ever fought back so fiercely. "Send out the pursuit squads," Zethar ordered. "Find them, destroy them, do not let them escape again." It was too late. The Vanguard, with its primitive but effective stealth technology, had already slipped past the fleet's defenses. They had made it deep into enemy territory. The Urakan had no idea what was about to hit them. Inside the Vanguard, Captain Graves stood by the control console watching as the countdown began. Her heart pounded in her chest, her hands steady. But the weight of what was about to unfold pressed on her like a stone. There would be no second chance. The EMP device was already primed, and once it was activated, the Urakan fleet would be crippled. But even in the midst of her resolve, she couldn't ignore the voice in the back of her mind. Could they really do this? Could they really defeat an empire that had obliterated entire star systems? Then, in a split second, everything changed. A signal. A disturbance. The Urakan had detected the Vanguard. "Captain!" The voice of her communications officer snapped her back to reality. "We've been spotted. Multiple enemy ships incoming. They're closing fast." Graves clenched her fists. There was no turning back now. Activate the EMP. Now! The ship trembled as the device powered up, sending a hum through the hull. Outside, the enemy fleet began to close in, weapons charging. But before they could launch their assault, the Vanguard released its pulse, a tidal wave of energy that cascaded across the stars. The moment the EMP hit, a deafening silence overtook the battlefield. The Empire's ships froze, their systems failing in an instant. Engines cut out, shields fell, and weapons systems went dead. The Urakan fleet, once a symbol of unstoppable power, was now a sitting target. It was then that the humans struck. As the Urakan scrambled to regain control, Earth's resistance descended on them like a storm. Ships, fighters, and the ground forces coordinated in a singular, overwhelming wave. The enemy was disoriented, unable to mount an effective defense. The Vanguard, its mission complete, vanished into the chaos, escaping the shattered fleet. On the ground, Earth's soldiers and civilians did the unthinkable. They fought tooth and nail, pushing the Uricon forces back, reclaiming cities one by one. It wasn't just a victory on the battlefield, it was a statement. Humanity was not going to roll over and die. And deep in the heart of the Uricon command center, Commander Zethar's fury erupted. He had failed. The Empire's greatest fleet had been humbled. The human race was not as weak as they thought. And now, they were on the brink of victory. But as the resistance grew bolder, Zethar began to realize something even more unsettling. The humans weren't just fighting to survive. No. They were fighting for revenge. Revenge for every life lost. Revenge for every city reduced to ash. Revenge for every soldier and civilian slaughtered under the shadow of the Empire's might. And that, Zethar knew, was far more dangerous than any weapon or fleet. The war had only just begun, and it would be the humans who dictated how it would end. With each passing day, humanity's resistance grew bolder, more organized, more determined. The Uricon's once invincible fleet, crippled by the devastating EMP strike and facing relentless human ingenuity, was starting to fall apart. Cities that were thought to be lost forever were slowly being reclaimed, not by overwhelming military force, but by the very spirit of the human race. A force that was unpredictable, wild, and maddeningly persistent. Meanwhile, Zethar, the Uricon commander, was no longer the confident, cold leader he had once been. The invaders had never experienced an opponent like this. At first, they had underestimated the humans, thinking them weak, disorganized, and easy prey. But what they didn't realize was that the greatest strength of humanity lay not in their technology, but in their resolve. And it was that resolve that would carry them through even the most impossible odds. The Empire had initially planned for a swift, one-sided war. The Uricon were experts at warfare, their strategies perfected over millennia of interstellar conquest. But against Earth, they found themselves fighting a war of attrition, a war that they had not prepared for. Captain Eliza Graves, commander of the Vanguard, knew that the humans had gained a small victory, but it was only a beginning. They had taken down the fleet's command center, but Zethar was still alive, and his forces were regathering. The Uricon's retaliatory strikes were growing fiercer by the day. They would not simply leave, they would fight to the bitter end. As she sat in the command center of the Vanguard, Graves stared out at the stars. Earth was far from safe, and every victory felt like a fleeting moment of hope, overshadowed by the overwhelming presence of the enemy. But one thing was clear. If humanity was to win this war, they would have to use everything at their disposal. The time for small victories was over. They needed to strike at the heart of the Empire itself. Graves knew what had to be done. "We need to hit their homeworld," she said quietly, as her senior officers gathered around her. "If we can take out the Uricon's capital, we can cripple their entire empire. We don't need to win the war on Earth alone. We need to take the fight to them." There was a pause, as her officers exchanged uncertain glances. The Empire's capital world was light years away, deep within Uricon-controlled space. The idea of even attempting such a mission seemed ludicrous. But Graves wasn't deterred. She had seen what humanity was capable of when faced with annihilation. The Uricon had no idea what was coming. "We have one chance," Graves continued, her voice steady. "We may be outgunned, but we have one advantage they will never have. Our will." Zethar, meanwhile, had not been idle. Despite the defeats, the Empire's forces were regrouping and preparing for a final push. The humans were a formidable foe, yes, but their resistance was nothing more than a delay. The Uricon's plan to crush Earth was still in motion. Zethar would not allow this minor rebellion to undermine the might of his empire. But even as Zethar focused on his strategy, something felt off. The humans were not acting like any species he had encountered before. They weren't motivated by fear or greed like the other civilizations they had conquered. No, the humans were fighting for something deeper, something that wasn't easily understood, even by the most advanced minds of the Uricon. Zethar's doubts began to grow. His empire, so vast and mighty, was now facing a challenge that threatened its very existence. The humans had shown that they were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting for something far more powerful: freedom. And that, Zethar realized, was a force that even his empire might not be able to defeat. The Vanguard, equipped with a ragtag fleet of human ships, made its way toward the heart of Urakan space. It was a suicide mission, but for Captain Graves and her crew, it was the only option. They could not wait any longer for the Urakan to finish their reinforcements. Earth's defenders had to hit them where it would hurt the most, right at the core of the Empire. The journey would be long. They had no idea how many more Urakan ships they would encounter on their way to the capital, but they didn't have the luxury of time. Every day they spent waiting was another day the Urakan would use to rebuild their strength. As the Vanguard neared the border of Urakan-controlled space, the crew prepared for what could be their final mission. They had no illusions about the dangers ahead. No one expected them to come back. Their goal wasn't to survive. They were here to deliver a message. The Urakan had underestimated humanity, and now they would know the full cost of their mistake. The battle for the Empire's capital began quietly. The Vanguard and its ragtag fleet, having evaded Urakan patrols, slipped through the defenses and entered the heart of the Empire. Their destination was clear: the central command structure, the place where all of the Urakan's fleets were coordinated. But the closer they got, the more the reality of the situation set in. The Urakan had fortified their capital, and it was surrounded by a vast fleet of warships, far larger than anything the humans had encountered. Earth's forces were outnumbered, but not outmatched. With a final glance at her crew, Graves gave the order. "For Earth," she said. The battle. Erupted explosions filled the void as both sides collided in the heart of the Empire. Urakan ships, bristling with weapons, moved with precision, while the human fleet danced unpredictably through the chaos. The Vanguard's EMP device was their last hope, but the enemy was relentless, and time was running out. In the heart of the chaos, Zythar watched in disbelief. Earth's fleet was small, yes, but it was far more capable than he had anticipated. They were fighting with the ferocity of a species that had nothing left to lose. As his flagship turned to face the Vanguard, the Empire's fleets suddenly began to experience what had crippled them before: the strange pulse of Earth's EMP technology. But this time, the humans had perfected it. The tide of war was shifting. Zythar could feel it, and he wasn't sure if it could be stopped. The battle above the Urakan capital was like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. The humans, their forces now united and desperate, fought with an intensity that shook the very core of the Empire. But it wasn't just their will to survive that drove them. It was the knowledge that they were not fighting for themselves anymore. They were fighting for the generations that would come after them. For every person, every family, and every future that the Urakan would erase if they succeeded. The Vanguard, with Captain Graves leading the charge, plunged into the heart of the Urakan fleet, the pulse of their EMP weapon crackling through the ship's corridors. It was their final gambit. The weapon was all they had left. The ship itself was nearly a wreck, its systems on the brink of failure after days of relentless combat. But they kept going, pushing forward, because if they didn't, there would be nothing left to fight for. As the Vanguard drew closer to the central command station on the capital world, the reality of their situation set in. Every ship that entered the heart of the Empire faced the same fate. The Urakan were no longer holding back. They knew what was at stake, and they would fight to the very end. The final showdown occurred on the very surface of the Urakan's capital. In a large underground command complex, Zythar stood at the center of a control room, watching the chaos unfold on his monitors. His empire, once so vast and unshakable, was crumbling before him. The human resistance had done what no one thought possible. They had broken through the greatest military force in the galaxy. Zythar clenched his fists. He had lost. But the war was not over yet. He still had one card left to play. The central command station was heavily fortified. Zythar had prepared a countermeasure, a final weapon that would ensure his empire's survival. It was a self-destruct protocol, capable of wiping out everything. The capital, the fleet, the human resistance. It would all be gone in an instant, and, with that thought, the commander made his decision. The moment Zythar activated the self-destruct sequence, a silent alarm began to echo across the battlefield. The Vanguard and the rest of the human fleet, now within the shadow of the capital, began to receive distress signals. A countdown had begun. "What's happening?" Captain Graves asked, her voice tight with urgency as she glanced at her crew. They knew the consequences. If the capital went up in flames, everything they had fought for would be destroyed in one cataclysmic explosion. "We need to get out of here now." But it was too late. The countdown was already at 5 minutes. The Huracan, desperate to protect their final stronghold, had activated their last resort. An annihilation device that would erase everything. It was a last-ditch effort to ensure that the humans would never have the opportunity to finish what they had started. Graves' eyes widened. They were too far in. They had no escape route, no time to run. The weapon, whatever it was, would obliterate the entire system. There would be no survivors. "No one gets out," Graves whispered under her breath. In the midst of the chaos, a new plan emerged, an improbable one, but perhaps the only way they could stop the self-destruct from wiping them all out. If the EMP pulse could disable the Huracan's control center and their last-ditch weapons, maybe, just maybe, they could shut the countdown down. But it meant getting close enough to risk it all. The Vanguard, battered and broken, plunged deeper into the core of the Huracan capital, with the crew knowing that this was their final moment. Each second, each heartbeat felt like an eternity. Graves could feel the weight of it all. This was not just the last battle for humanity, but for the entire galaxy. They reached the central control station, the heart of the Huracan Empire, and it was there, in those final moments, that the humans made their final stand. Captain Graves, standing at the heart of the ship's command center, issued a single order: "Release the EMP." The Vanguard's EMP burst forth one final time, a blast of raw, concentrated energy that surged through the heart of the capital. For a brief moment, time seemed to stop. The control center shuddered. Lights flickered, and then silence. The self-destruct countdown halted. The Huracan fleet, once poised to wipe humanity from existence, was suddenly vulnerable. The heart of the Empire was no longer in control. The invincible warships, reliant on their technology, had been disabled once again. The Huracan had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, to fight with heart and ingenuity, when all seemed lost. Zithar, standing in the now quiet command room, felt his grip on the Empire slipping. He had watched his people fall, and now, it was his turn to face the consequences. In the final hours, the humans' rebellion had turned into a revolution. The Huracan Empire, once the most powerful force in the galaxy, was on the brink of collapse, not because of sheer military might, but because of something far more powerful: the human spirit. The battle was not won with superior technology or overwhelming numbers. It was won with the relentless pursuit of freedom. The Huracan had invaded Earth thinking they could crush a primitive species, but in the end, they had learned the hardest lesson of all: never underestimate the will of humanity. As the Vanguard prepared to make its final retreat, Captain Graves stood at the helm, watching the Huracan capital fall into chaos. "It's over," she said, her voice full of resolve. "We've won." But as the fleet began to retreat, a single thought lingered in the back of her mind. This war was over, but would the Huracan learn from their defeat? Or would they return, determined to finish what they had started? In the end, humanity had defeated the Empire's strongest fleet. They had obliterated it. And in doing so, they had reminded the universe that Earth was no easy target. But as Graves looked toward the stars, she knew one thing for certain: the war for Earth had ended. But the fight for its future was just beginning. As the Huracan fleet retreated into the depths of space, the silence that followed was deafening. The chaos of battle, the explosions, the screams, the sheer fury of war had quieted, replaced by an eerie calm that seemed to stretch across the stars. Earth had won, but what did victory mean in the wake of such devastation? What did it mean for a species that had just learned the true cost of survival? Captain Eliza Graves stood alone on the observation deck of the Vanguard, staring at the remnants of the Huracan fleet as they scattered, broken, and defeated. The stars stretched out before her, vast and infinite. But for the first time, they didn't feel quite as welcoming. The war was over, yes, but the consequences of their victory were only beginning to unfold. Earth had fought against an empire that spanned the galaxy, an empire that had crushed civilizations and extinguished worlds with nothing but cold efficiency. Now, humanity was left to pick up the pieces, to rebuild a world that had been pushed to the brink of annihilation. But the Urukhan were not easily defeated. Zithar, though he had been forced to flee, would not simply accept defeat. Graves knew the harsh reality. The war was over for now, but the battle for Earth's survival would be a continuous fight. "Captain," a voice broke through the stillness. Graves turned to see her communications officer, Lieutenant Silva, standing at the doorway. His expression was grave. "Zithar?" Graves asked, already knowing the answer. Silva nodded. "The Urukhan have retreated into the void. But their empire isn't done yet. They're reorganizing, gathering new forces. The Urukhan never forgive failure, especially not from a species they considered insignificant." A chill ran down Graves's spine. The fight had been brutal, but the hardest part was still ahead. Back on Earth, the mood was a strange mix of euphoria and uncertainty. The major cities, once reduced to rubble, were slowly being rebuilt, but there was a lingering sense of loss that no amount of rebuilding could erase. The world's infrastructure, its economy, and its governments had all been severely crippled during the invasion. Now, humanity had to forge a new path forward from the ashes. The victory over the Urukhan was celebrated by many, but the survivors knew better than to believe the fight was truly over. Every major military power on Earth had fallen in the first wave of the invasion, and though they had rallied, they were still fractured, still reeling from the shock. New alliances had formed, and the world had begun to rebuild its defenses. But there was no denying the harsh truth. The Urukhan would be back. Yet in this new era, humanity had learned something invaluable. They were capable of more than just survival. They could fight, adapt, and endure like no other species in the galaxy. The Urukhan had underestimated them, and that mistake would be their downfall. Months passed, and humanity's defenses were bolstered by new technology scavenged from the wreckage of the Urukhan fleet. Earth was not the same planet it had been before the invasion. It had been transformed, evolved, hardened. The remnants of human civilization were rebuilding faster than any alien force had anticipated, creating new weapon systems, new strategies, and new alliances. Yet, even as Earth took its first steps toward recovery, whispers spread. The galaxy, once a distant concept, was now a reality to the people of Earth. They knew the truth. There were other civilizations, other empires that would hear of humanity's victory, and come seeking the riches of a world that had defied the might of the Urukhan. The humans had drawn attention to themselves, and that would have consequences. Graves's voice crackled over the comms one fateful night as she addressed the leaders of the new global council that had been formed. "We've just sent a message across the stars," she said, her voice strong, unwavering. "The Urukhan are the first empire to come for us, but they won't be the last. Earth is no longer just a backwater planet. We've shown them that humanity will never kneel. We will not just survive, we will make them understand. We are the last ones standing, and we will stand again." Graves paused, her gaze hardening as the enormity of her words set in. "Prepare yourselves. We're not just rebuilding the world, we're preparing for war." On a distant world, light years away, Zithar brooded in the aftermath of his failure. His once pristine flagship was now reduced to scrap, drifting aimlessly in space. His fleet, once a symbol of the Urukhan's power, had been shattered, scattered, and forced to retreat into the unknown. The humans, those primitive beings, had broken their iron grip on Earth. They had obliterated his fleet, and yet, something lingered in the back of Zithar's mind, something he couldn't ignore. The humans were a paradox. They were weak in many ways, unrefined, untested, a species that had only recently learned how to navigate the stars. But they had something that no other species he had encountered had: an unwavering belief in themselves. It was the one thing that had made them dangerous. He had underestimated them once. But Zithar was not a fool. He would not make that mistake again. "Prepare the fleet," Zithar commanded his remaining officers, his voice cold and filled with venom. "We returned to Earth. As Earth's defenses grew stronger and its people rallied, the galaxy began to take notice. The humans, once thought to be insignificant, were now a force to be reckoned with. The Uricon might have been the first to challenge them, but they would not be the last. The question was no longer whether humanity could survive. It was whether the rest of the universe was ready to face what humanity was becoming. Earth had been invaded, shattered, and nearly obliterated. But they had risen from the ashes, stronger and more determined than ever before. And as the stars watched, the message was clear. Earth was no longer a target. It was a threat. The passage of time, as it often does, blurred the lines between what was once a distant memory and what was rapidly becoming an undeniable reality. Earth had begun to recover, its cities rising from the ruins like titans waking from their slumber. Humanity had lost much, but they had gained so much more. In the span of mere months, Earth's tech had catapulted into the future. Reverse-engineered Uricon technology, the kind that had been their weapon of mass destruction, was now humanity's greatest tool. What was once a threat was now their edge. But even as humanity rebuilt, a darker shadow loomed over the horizon. The Uricon, though battered and broken, had not been defeated. They had merely licked their wounds, retreated into the void, and now they were preparing to return. But the rest of the galaxy, their galaxy, was beginning to stir. This was the galaxy that had watched with bemusement as a primitive species like humanity rose from the ashes. And now, they weren't just watching anymore. Word of Earth's resistance, its victory, spread like wildfire across the stars. The message was clear. Humanity had become something new. No longer a defenseless world, Earth was now a beacon of resistance, of strength, and perhaps, most dangerously, of defiance. Deep within the unknown reaches of space, several alien species gathered in secret councils, their leaders speaking in hushed tones, pondering the implications of Earth's survival. One of the leaders, a towering figure whose face was obscured by an ornate helmet, stared across a long table at his fellow commanders. His species was known as the Zalkai, a race of hyper-intelligent, technologically advanced beings. For centuries they had sat at the top of the galactic food chain. The Uricon had been their equal, their closest allies. But Earth's victory had rattled even the Zalkai. "We cannot ignore this any longer," said the Zalkai leader, his voice low but filled with authority. "If the Uricon have been defeated by such a primitive species, what does that say about our place in the universe? They should have been crushed easily. Yet Earth stood firm. This humanity. They will not rest until they have a place in the galaxy." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. It wasn't just the Uricon who had been humbled by Earth. Every empire, every species, felt it, and none of them liked it. The leader turned his gaze to a map of the galaxy, his fingers tracing the trajectories of countless worlds, all connected by ancient alliances and bitter rivalries. "The Uricon will strike again. Of that I have no doubt. But we must act first. Earth cannot be allowed to rise unchecked. We must prevent their ascendancy." Back on Earth, the political landscape was as fractured as ever. Governments that had once operated independently now found themselves drawn together by a common purpose: to prepare for the inevitable return of the Uricon, and perhaps worse, the watchful eyes of every other empire that had been keeping tabs on their rapid recovery. The survivors of the war had become an unlikely alliance, bound together by the shared trauma of the invasion. The United Earth Coalition, UEC, as it had become known, was formed in the aftermath of the invasion. It represented every corner of the world. Each country, each people, each culture now united in a way that would have been unthinkable just a year before. Captain Eliza Graves stood at the heart of this new order, her leadership cemented not just by her military successes, but by the respect she had earned from every nation. She was no longer just the commander of the vanguard, she was the symbol of Earth's resilience. However, despite the unity, she knew that the galaxy had taken notice of Earth. And that reality hung over every decision she made, every order she gave. The rest of the universe might not understand it yet, but Earth was no longer a passive player. They had tasted the bitterness of war, and now they would be ready for the storms to come. "Admiral Graves, we've intercepted a transmission," said her communications officer Lithorn Silva. He handed her a holographic device, the signal coming from a long-forgotten corner of the galaxy. The signal was encrypted, and its origins were impossible to trace. Graves's brow furrowed as she studied the message. The transmission was brief, but the implications were massive. "We are watching you, Earth. Prepare yourselves." That was it. No signature, no clear threat, yet everything about the message screamed danger. Graves sat back in her chair, her mind racing. The transmission had to be from an alien faction, one that had been observing the rise of humanity. It could have been one of the many powers in the galaxy that had once dismissed Earth as insignificant. But now, Earth had their attention. "They know we're coming," Graves muttered under her breath. The next day, at a meeting of the UEC's leadership, Graves addressed the council. "We've been given a warning," she said. "Someone out there, someone beyond our borders, has taken notice of us. We knew the Huracan wouldn't be the only threat, but this is different." A hushed silence filled the room. The leaders of the various nations, once divided by petty squabbles, now found themselves united by the reality that they were no longer safe. The universe was watching them. And more importantly, the universe was waiting for them to fail. "They will come," Graves continued. "I don't know who they are yet, but I know one thing for sure. Earth must be ready. We are not just defending our planet anymore. We are defending our place in the galaxy." The room fell into an uneasy silence. Each leader understood the gravity of the situation, the weight of their responsibility. The days of Earth being a peaceful, undiscovered backwater were long gone. They had been thrust into a galactic stage, and it was up to them to decide what role they would play in the coming conflict. Meanwhile, in the dark depths of the galaxy, the Huracan regrouped. Zethar, having narrowly escaped death, was busy rebuilding his forces, more determined than ever to erase Earth from existence. But he was not alone in his desire for revenge. As his fleet gathered once again, alliances began to form. Alliances with the very empires that had once looked down on humanity. The first major strike was coming. Not from the Huracan alone, but from a coalition of forces, each with their own reasons for wanting Earth obliterated. Humanity had united under a single banner. But as they prepared for the coming storm, one question echoed in every mind. Would they be enough to face the galaxy's wrath? The warning signs were there long before the first shots were fired. Humanity, united under the banner of the United Earth Coalition, had prepared as best as they could. The leaders of Earth, driven by the weight of their fragile victory over the Huracan, were determined not to be caught off guard again. Yet, the stars that once seemed so distant and endless now felt unnervingly close, as if the entire galaxy was bearing down on them. It had been 6 months since the strange transmission from an unknown force had rattled Earth. In that time, humanity had continued its rapid recovery. New technologies had been integrated, old alliances had been forged, and the galactic tide was shifting in ways no one could have anticipated. The alien powers that had once looked down upon humanity's primitive nature had begun to take interest, not in their survival, but in their rise. Captain Eliza Graves stood before the tactical table in the UEC's Central Command, now the heart of Earth's defense network. The room was filled with officers, strategists, and experts from every corner of the planet. Graves, her face stern and resolute, watched as the holographic map of the galaxy rotated before her. It was an intricate display of data, planetary systems, fleets in motion, and war fronts shifting as the alliances of the galaxy began to take shape. "They've gathered," Graves said, her voice low but steady. "The Huracan, the Zalkai, and other forces are assembling. This is not a single invasion. They're coordinating. Earth is their target, and they are coming for us." The officers around the table exchanged grim looks. It wasn't just one empire this time. The entire galaxy had begun to move, and Earth stood at the epicenter of a storm it had never asked for, a storm that was about to break. Elsewhere in the galaxy, far from the turbulent waters of Earth, a new alliance of empires was forming. The Huracan, licking their wounds from their devastating defeat, had joined forces with the Zalkai, whose technological superiority rivaled any force the galaxy had seen. But the coalition wasn't just made up of these two powers. The Tsaric Dominion, a race of reptilian warriors known for their brutal conquests, and the Kern, a mysterious species of psionic beings who had long hidden in the shadows, were all part of this growing coalition. Each one brought their own motivations: fear, pride, greed, and vengeance, all converging on Earth. Zethar, the shattered Urakan commander, stood before a gathering of the coalition's leaders. His arrogance had been shattered by his failure, but it had been replaced by a cold, calculating resolve. The humans had humiliated him, yes, but no more. This time, Earth would burn. "Our enemies are weak," Zethar growled. "They've built their defenses on the wreckage of their own survival. It is a fragile thing. We will destroy it, crush it beneath our boots." The Zalkai leader, a towering figure cloaked in shadows, nodded. "We will send a message to the galaxy. Humanity's defiance cannot go unanswered. We will reclaim the galaxy, and Earth will be the example. We will remind the universe of the power we wield." Back on Earth, the preparations were underway. Graves knew the stakes were higher than ever before. The first battle would be humanity's last chance to show the galaxy they were not a fluke. They had not survived the Urakan only by accident. They had done it by fighting smarter, by using every tool at their disposal, and now they would do it again. The United Earth Coalition had mobilized everything they had: soldiers, ships, weapons, and technology. But it wasn't just their own strength they had to rely on. Earth had made unlikely alliances of its own. The Velkarians, an ancient race of sentient machines, had offered their assistance, intrigued by humanity's ability to adapt. The Alir Syndicate, a powerful group of mercenaries, had pledged their forces, seeing the opportunity for both profit and vengeance against the Urakan. These factions, though not entirely trustworthy, were united in a singular cause: Earth's survival. It was a bitter reality. Humanity, once thought to be weak, had become the linchpin of galactic power, and it had attracted the attention of the universe's most dangerous forces. The first strike came without warning. At 0800 hours, Earth's advanced detection systems picked up the first wave of incoming ships. Hundreds of them, led by the Urakan flagship, the Marauder's Wrath. It was a massive vessel, the size of a small moon, and it descended upon Earth like a harbinger of doom. The Urakan were no longer the only threat. As the first wave of alien ships tore through the outer layers of Earth's defense network, the true scale of the assault became clear. The Zalkai warships, sleek and deadly, flanked the Urakan's advance, while the Zarek fleet, vast and heavily armored, poured in from another direction. And the Kern, dreadfully quiet and ethereal, sank into Earth's atmosphere like specters, their psionic powers already working to destabilize Earth's communications and defense systems. "We have incoming. All ships, prepare for battle." Graves's voice rang out through the chaos, calm yet filled with the unrelenting weight of leadership. The sky above Earth darkened as the first volley of fire from the invading forces hit Earth's atmosphere. Bright streaks of plasma and energy exploded against Earth's defenses, turning the sky into a fiery, chaotic mess. The very ground trembled as Earth's last line of defense, the Defender-class orbital fleet, launched their counterattack. It was a battle unlike any Earth had seen before. The sky above, once a tranquil blue, was now alive with death. Ships and explosions lit up the atmosphere in a deadly dance of light. The Vanguard, now reinforced with Earth's most advanced weaponry, cut through the enemy fleet like a blade, through paper, while human fighter craft swooped in to engage the invaders head-on. Graves stood at the center of it all, her mind focused on the mission ahead. This wasn't just a fight for Earth's survival. It was a fight for humanity's place in the galaxy. They had defeated one of the strongest fleets ever assembled, but this was different. The galaxy had united against them, and now Earth had to face its first true test as a galactic power. The sky burned. Ships fell from orbit. The battle had begun. As Earth's defenders clashed against the invaders in orbit, the true test of humanity's resolve had begun. Would they break beneath the might of the galaxy's strongest fleets? Or would Earth prove that it was not a world to be underestimated? Graves knew one thing for certain. Earth would fight until the last breath, and in the heat of the battle, the fate of the galaxy would be decided. The battle above Earth was like nothing the galaxy had ever witnessed. Thousands of ships clashed in the void, fireballs and explosions illuminating the sky as Earth's defenders fought tooth and nail against an overwhelming force. The Urakan, the Zalkai, the Zarek, and the Kern, all their fleets had converged on Earth. And yet, Amidst the chaos, the humans did not falter. Earth had been knocked down before, but it would not be knocked down again, not without a fight. Captain Eliza Graves, her fingers gripping the command console of the Vanguard, watched as her fleet engaged the enemy forces. The Vanguard was a symbol of humanity's resilience, a warship built from the wreckage of the very ships that had once threatened Earth. It was more than a vessel now. It was a symbol of their fight, their survival. Vanguard to all units. Stay focused. We break their lines, or they break us, Graves barked, her voice cutting through the chaos of battle. Despite the overwhelming odds, humanity's ships fought with a singular purpose. The once ragtag remnants of Earth's fleets, scattered and broken after the initial invasion, had been reforged into something more. With the advanced Huracan technology integrated into their ships, Earth's forces had become a formidable fighting force. Human ingenuity had turned their most devastating weakness, being outnumbered, into an advantage. The Huracan and their allies expected chaos, disorganization, and panic. What they had found instead was a well-coordinated, relentless assault that kept them guessing at every turn. The Huracan flagship, the Marauder's Wrath, led the charge, its massive guns firing on all cylinders, tearing through Earth's outer defense lines. But the humans had learned from their last encounter with the Huracan. Their ships were faster, more agile. They could maneuver around the Marauder's Wrath's fire, hit them where they least expected, and strike with precision. Graves stood, at the center of it all, her mind focused, every decision weighing heavily on her shoulders. She knew that defeating the Marauder's Wrath wouldn't be enough. The alien fleet was vast, and their alliance was strong. Victory in the skies was only the first step. Captain Graves, a voice broke through the tension. Lieutenant Silva, her communications officer, stood at the console, eyes wide. "We've got a transmission. It's from the Huracan leader, Zithar. He wants to speak with you." Graves hesitated, her mind racing. Zithar had already proven himself a deadly adversary. Why would he reach out now? But there was no time to second-guess. She nodded, signaling for the transmission to be patched through. A hologram flickered to life before her. Zithar's imposing figure loomed, his armored face twisted into a snarl. "Captain Graves," he said, his voice thick with anger. "You've done well to survive this long, but do not mistake your persistence for victory. You are outnumbered, outmatched. Your world will fall, and you will kneel before the might of the Huracan." Graves's heart raced, but her resolve remained unshaken. "We've faced worse than you, Zithar. You and your empire may have been unstoppable once, but we're not the same people you attacked last time. We've learned, we've adapted, and we will never kneel." Zithar's lips curled into a smile. "We shall see." The transmission cut out abruptly, leaving only the deafening sound of battle. The Huracan leader's words hung in the air like a dark prophecy. But Captain Graves refused to let them seep into her mind. The fight was far from over. She turned to the tactical board, her fingers flying over the controls, issuing commands to her fleet. The battle escalated as more ships poured into the fray. The Zalkai had unleashed their most advanced warships, their sleek, almost liquid-like forms cutting through the debris-strewn battlefield. Their weapons were precision strikes that could obliterate an entire fleet with one shot. But the humans had anticipated this, and Earth's fleets adapted quickly. They took to guerrilla tactics, using their speed and knowledge of the terrain to their advantage, luring the Zalkai into traps and disabling their ships with pinpoint attacks. Meanwhile, the Tsaric Dominion unleashed wave after wave of reptilian fighters, their brutal, savage nature making them deadly in close combat. But they too underestimated humanity's resolve. Earth's pilots, battle-hardened and driven by the memory of the last invasion, fought with a ferocity that took even the Tsaric by surprise. For every Tsaric fighter that was lost, 10 more human ships rose to replace it. The real surprise came from the Kern, the psionic race. They had the ability to influence minds, to turn the tide of battles with sheer mental force. But the humans had found a way to counteract their powers, using advanced neural shields to protect their minds from the Kern's mental influence. It wasn't enough to stop the Kern completely, but it was enough to level the playing field. With every wave, Earth's forces grew stronger. The alien fleets had underestimated the human spirit, and they were beginning to pay the price for it. As the battle raged on, a singular question began to dominate Graves's mind. Could they win? Could Earth truly defy the galaxy itself? The odds were overwhelming, the damage to Earth's surface catastrophic, but humanity was proving something the galaxy had never believed. They would not surrender. Not now. Not ever. Just as the battle seemed to be tipping in the humans' favor, the Marauder's wrath emerged from the smoke and fire. It had taken significant damage, its hull scorched and battered, but it was still a threat. Zethar's voice boomed through the comms once more, filled with rage. You have only delayed the inevitable, Captain Graves. Your world will burn. Graves's face was a mask of determination as she prepared her final strike. Then let's finish this, she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. With a final command, Earth's remaining forces locked in on the Marauder's wrath. A barrage of firepower surged forward, every ship, every fighter, every soldier focused on a singular goal: destroy the Uricon flagship. The explosion that followed was nothing short of cataclysmic. The Marauder's wrath erupted in a massive fireball, its enormous frame splitting apart in an inferno of light. The shockwave reverberated across the battlefield, tearing through the remaining Uricon fleet and sending a clear message to the galaxy. The battle was far from over, but Zethar's loss was a turning point. The Uricon flagship, their symbol of power, had fallen. It was a devastating blow, not just to the Uricon, but to the entire coalition arrayed against Earth. For the first time, the enemy forces hesitated. The humans had proven something the galaxy could no longer ignore. They were no longer weak. They were not an isolated world to be conquered. Earth was a force. Graves stood at the helm, the battlefield flashing in her eyes as she watched her victory unfold. The galaxy might not have seen it yet, but the truth was clear. Earth had just redefined its place in the universe. The fight was not over. It would never be over. But Earth had won something more than just a battle. They had won the right to exist. And in the days to come, the universe would learn that humanity was not a species to be conquered. It was a species to be reckoned with.